start by welcoming everyone to our next session in our Gracie interview series of virtual gathering. I'm Becky Brooks, the Executive Director of the Alliance for Women in Media. We are incredibly fortunate to have with us today Jill Frederickson, who is Senior Vice President of Content and Strategy at ESPN, although I think I left out part of her title, and Nicole Briscoe, who will be moderating for us. And as you may have heard, if you were on early enough, she was on SportsCenter this morning, so obviously she's on-air talent. The two of them have known each other for a number of years, so this will be a great conversation. And we also are very grateful to Katina Arnold, who serves on the AWM Board of Directors. And with that, I know people will be joining. Nicole will talk about how to ask questions, but with that, I'll turn off my camera and I'll leave it to the two experts and our guests.
Okay, thank you. I have to tell the story of Jill texting me and asking me if I wanted to interview her. What did I say? Yes, let me. But this is going to be fun. This is good. Jill and I have known each other for 17 years. It takes us all the way back to 2003, well before I was at ESPN. So we've known each other for a long time. We've worked together and around each other. And then once again, she's my boss. But like Becky said, she is the Senior Vice President of Production and Content Strategy, also known as my boss. She's been with ESPN since 2003, which I think you and I met shortly after you started.
Yeah.
We named the Senior Vice President of Production and Content Strategy in January of 2020, which feels like forever ago, but you were previously the Vice President in Production Content Strategy, and prior to that, the Vice President in SportsCenter and the news editorial operations, and I could take out all of these things, and I'm probably making it seem like it's a lot, but I'm probably also not making it seem like it's enough, because you also oversee all of the morning and afternoon sports centers. But the most important job that she has is mom to Jane, who's 15, and Molly, who's 11. So you got a lot on your plate.
I like it that way.
Well, yes, it keeps us busy, right? And
right.
That's what we kind of need. So I was thinking earlier, I jokingly say it feels like dog years, like 2020. And I think back to what happened when this year began. And here we are now, 9 months later. When you think of 2020 to this point, like, how would you sum it up?
Gosh, I should come up with a clever way to sum it up. But I would just say unpredictable. I mean, just when you think you've kind of got your handle on something else happens. And, we've sort of talked about it before, Nicole, that in this business, in this news business, in this live television business, we're trained to be able to react to the unpredictable. But I think what we've seen this year is just unlike anything anybody's been trained to do, because it's just been a complete intersection of sports, life, health, death, and social, cultural issues all together. And whereas in normal life or pre-2020, we were able to compartmentalize a lot of those things. Now everything is just jumbled together and we're all dealing with it at the same time. And that's just what has made this year really, really challenging.
So go back to January, and I personally will never forget when I first saw the tweets about the Kobe Bryant helicopter crash. And I remember vividly thinking, I am not going to believe any of this is true until I see it from Woj, right? And you saw the news from Woj and you saw it confirmed, and then the ball was really, really rolling. Why is that a story that you hate to be good at it, but why is that a story that we're prepared for? Why is that a story that we can handle with relative ease?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. We're a news organization. That's our job. We're supposed to be able to not only report the news, which obviously that was horrible news to report, but to your point, we had lots of conversations before we actually went with things. I mean, ESPN, we're incredibly careful about about any sort of news about death. And that's right, and rightfully so. You don't want to be first, you want to be right. And that's not something to mess around with. And so I remember I was at a swim meet, my daughter's swim meet, and I got a text from my colleague who runs the news desk. And I just said, I got to go. And I went outside the pool and we were, deciding whether to report it, so because we know that when ESPN reports something, people trust it. So that was the first burden. We do that every day on various, levels of importance of stories. But we take being accurate really important, very importantly. And so, but once we report the news, then it's our job to give context. And that's what I think, we have experts, we have reporters, we have people who have been in the world of various sports, in this case, NBA, for decades, who have relationships with these athletes, either the principals involved or the people who are around the principal involved. And this story, we actually thought that story was a major story, but it had a uniqueness in that many of the people in our world, in our ESPN world, had deep relationships with Kobe. And so it was personal, and they're having to report on the death of not only a huge sports figure, but somebody who really meant something personal to them. And then you add in the fact of his daughter and the other families. And it was it was tragic to the nth degree. But even with that, we are trained to be able to report on those things, to give context, to give proper homage, to give perspective, all of those things for a sports story like that. And so, when Muhammad Ali died, it was different, but it was a huge sports figure, an iconic figure. It was just more predicted. This was added the tragedy level, but it was essentially a sports news story, which is what we do.
That is what we do. What I can honestly say that felt different for me and for everyone was what happened in May with George Floyd, because for the longest time, I've been with the company since early 2008. So since the beginning of Twitter, right? And we've had a variety of stances on social media and how we're going to report stories and things like this. And when George Floyd was killed, it started off as one thing and it became something else quickly. When did you realize from your role that this was going to be something that was a sports story, that was going to require us to talk about it and address it, and it was going to be more than just a story, it was going to be a movement or a moment?
I'm not sure. I think when the idea that it was going to become more in a movement, I think came later. But I remember the morning that, I wake up, not quite as early as you do, but I wake up early in the morning, and the first thing I do is I look at all of my emails, I look at social media. We get a curated list of the top, engaged social media posts of sports figures. And all of a sudden I saw all these, LeBron and Steven Jackson and all these people, saying rest in peace and just, commenting on this tragedy that I wasn't that well aware of. And so, I first started engaging our news group and our colleagues who do Get Up, because at the time, Get Up was actually our talk show that was on first, our first live programming of the day. And then we, SportsCenter, weren't on live until noon. And we realized that this was a tragedy and a death that was absolutely engaging everybody in sports, and it had a sports connection because he was so close to Steven Jackson, who, was in the NBA, who actually worked for us for a while. And so we knew that all of a sudden it was a story for us on how the sports world was reacting. And then it just, it really did just take off. And, I don't know that I can pinpoint the time that I realized how big it was, but I just think that we realized that our colleagues were responding to this not just as not as a piece of content that we were covering, but as something that was hitting them personally in their homes and their life experiences before they even walk in the doors of ESPN. You know, and I think the catharsis, I don't even know if you can call it a catharsis, but the outpouring of stories that you heard on air, off air, you know, in group meetings, and just the fact that people wanted to talk about these things that have happened to them and let you know what they've been going through their entire lives and what they've been carrying with them when you see them at work and you don't know all those stories. That became very personal. And I think, you know, maybe it's the combination of being in the pandemic where a lot of people were at home and they couldn't necessarily, maybe they were working from home, or everybody's worlds are kind of colliding. And even then when you're doing one of these, a Zoom, I mean, I'm fortunate to be in an office. You know, you're letting us in your home today, Nicole, right? And so, you know, here you are, this incredibly personal thing has happened, but it's also, you know, something that we're covering for the sports world. We're doing our work calls and we're in people's homes, and you can't separate the two. And I think that's when it all kind of came together and we realized this is, we're not only covering this as a news entity and as a sports entity, but we also need to address how this is impacting all of our colleagues as people.